Hello there. In this topic, we're going to take a look at the auxiliary features of HANA and how they are useful to us. Okay, let's first take a look at the configure import server. So most of them are here. And first, let's take a look at the configure import server. Now, configure import server is something which you will use when you want to talk to the data services and bring the metadata from SAP ERP or any data source for that matter. So basically you have to give the address for data services over here, and only then can you pick up the metadata information when you go to selective import of metadata. And then when you actually go here, to be able to see a connection here, you should first configure a configure import server. That's how the SAP HANA database knows where your BODS is sitting and which data store you want to use. Okay, the next is mass copy. So when you want to copy a set of packages or a package from one into another package, then you can do this. So let's say that you want to copy the training test into training. So you can just say training test, and then you can say which is your target package, which is going to be training. Great. Now when you say next, it's going to show all the objects here of training test and then what you want to push to training. I'm not going to do that here, so you can try it in the exercise. The next is mass validate and mass activate. So if you want to do a mass validation, which happens when you bring a lot of objects from another system and then you want to mass validate. So in this case, we don't have any of those objects, but what happens, the idea is that when you import packages from other systems, then what happens is they are not validated. You can deactivate. You will choose not to activate because you might not have done schema mapping and other things. So there will be a requirement to mass validate. So you will have like maybe 10-20 models which you need to validate and activate. So instead of doing one by one, you can do it at one time. So that's what is validate, activate, and redeploy. Let's take a look at auto documentation. So this is an interesting feature which is very useful. So let's say that I want a documentation about our calculation view called Copa Calc. Then what I can do is I can simply create an auto documentation. So I don't have to go and physically write a PDF. So I can just ask HANA to do it for us. So where you want to keep it, let's say we want to keep it all at a new folder, and this is where it's going to be. And there are two types of documents. One is model details and one is model list. List only talks about the objects which you use. Model details talks about joins and other objects and calculated columns and things like that. All right, let's go ahead and do this. Let's say we want to do Copa Calc. All right, let's say finish. So it's currently creating. So it's been completed. Let's go take a look at it. So when I come out of the database, let's go to new folder here and then go to HDB training Copa. So when you open this model here, it's opening in the Firefox document. I will have to change the setting to read from Adobe. Since we don't have Adobe here, it's opening up a browser. So here what you can see is the name of the model. You can see the owner, you can see what it is, and if you come down, you can see all the columns here, you can see the mappings, and if you come down further, you'll be able to see the hierarchies and you'll be able to see the different measures and then all the cross references. So that's what will happen when you do auto documentation. All right, let's take a look at schema mapping. Schema mapping is very important. Schema mapping is when you send out a model inside, right? So you might have built those models from some underlying tables coming from some schema. So the name of that schema might be different from the name of the schema which you have in your current system. So the tables might be the same, but the name of the schema might be different. So to do that, you at a global level define schema mapping. So you say that SAP source equal to SAP target. So I'm just giving you an example. So you can say that SAP source, whatever the schema name may be at SAP source, you're saying that that is equal to something in our database. So you're saying that is equal to training in this equation. Okay, so you can say finish. Once you say finish, then it will automatically understand when the validation process happens that okay, so SAP source means training 1. Now if you want to change that authoring schema, then you can come here to the next feature called change authoring schema, and you can select a set of packages or a single package. Let's say for example this one, and then you can change your authoring schema. So now you have two options. So you can say that okay, the authoring schema source was source, and then now the target should be ECC. So both are authoring schemas which are coming from the source systems. You're just switching it for this particular model. So there are situations when you have to do that. Now these functionalities were not there before, and they have been included as we go on, as we came from SP3 to SP9 because of the requirements. Let's take a look at the last one, switch ownership. Switch ownership is the functionality which allows you to take over an inactive object of a specific user. So let's say that let's go to SAP BW4. This is a user, and the user has so many inactive objects. So you can take over these objects as a system user, or whatever the current user is. You can take over these objects. So that is the functionality of switch ownership. So if you see, you have taken over the object.